Hello, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and I want to thank all of our keynote speakers, expert moderators, panelists, and solutions sponsors for participating in this year's Insight Jam Live. This has been a big year with the launch of the InsightJam.com community site and the amazing growth of the Insight Jam YouTube channel, which now has over 500,000 subscribers. Much of this success is tied directly to the video events, podcasts, and panel discussions we have been producing, and none of that would be possible without the thoughtful participation of the many IT professionals who are generously sharing their expert insights for this latest jam. We are building Insight Jam to be a place to celebrate enterprise technology with best practices, expert analysis, and solution showcases. And we want all of you to join us there to keep the jam going into the new year and beyond. If you haven't joined Insight Jam, please do. And if you already have, take a moment to invite some of your colleagues. And again, thank you all for being here and enjoy this event.
Solutions Review presents Insight Jam, a social media community for enterprise technology. Hello and welcome to the 29th and final video event of the 6th annual Insight Jam. My name is Jonathan Paula, pleased to bring you one last time another great panel on enterprise technology, and this topic for the next hour, Mastering AI, Transforming Careers Through Education and Training. We've assembled a great group of gentlemen from around the country to discuss. Eric, Ben, Dan, Donald, Gregory, and Matt, welcome. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. So we're going to start with some introductions. Eric, you've agreed to moderate, so we'll have you go first. 30 seconds or so. Tell the audience a bit about your professional history.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's great to have this opportunity to run this terrific panel. It's a topic near and dear to my heart. I've been in machine learning for more than 32 years. I'm a former Columbia University professor, co-founder and CEO of Gooder AI, but also been actively in a thought leadership role for 21 years. I'm the author of 2 books, Predictive Analytics, which has been adopted at hundreds of universities, and more recently, the AI Playbook, which is first and foremost to upskill business readers on a certain accessible semi-technical understanding, which is vital for running and driving predictive AI projects successfully through to deployment. I'm also the founder of the long-running Machine Learning Week, formerly Predictive Analytics World Conference Series, coming June 2nd to 5th in Phoenix, which has a bunch of training full-day workshops.
Awesome. Thank you and welcome to the show. Let's go over to Ben next.
Hello, I'm Ben Tasker, and I'm the Dean of AI at Southern New Hampshire University, which is home to over 200,000 students, primarily online. My main goal is to ensure individuals understand that AI can enhance capabilities versus replace them. Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you very much for being here. Let's head over to Dan Huss next.
Hello, everyone. I am Dan. For the last 6 years, I've been running a venture-backed startup, Gravity AI, which essentially is AI infrastructure. We function as an internal catalog and deployment system for large enterprise. But as you can see on the screen here as well, I'm actually a distinguished faculty at General Assembly, where I teach Fortune 500 companies about artificial intelligence. I also sit on their future skills in AI board, as well as 2 AI ethics committees. I'm very stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Right on. Appreciate you making the time for us. Let's go over to Donald Farmer next. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and great to be here. So I'm a product guy. I've been building data and analytics products for, well, probably over 40 years now. I spent a lot of time at Microsoft. I was at Click building their 2nd generation analytics technology. Now I'm independent and I advise startups and, well, companies from startups to the world's largest software companies on data and analytics strategy. And I'm an advisor on numerous boards. I do a lot of talking, lecturing, writing globally, but primarily from a kind of product perspective, because I'm really interested in how we productize technology rather than, say, being an implementer or a consultant in that sense.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Gregory, over to you next.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Gregory Lewandowski, and I spent about 20 years of my career in the enterprise between Ingram Micro, Cisco, and Citrix. And one of the things that I learned there is anytime there was a world-shaking technology that was thrust upon us, that so much of its success really depended upon how do you implement it and how do you change the culture? So I've recently started a company called Glue that is focused on driving and changing the culture in order to adopt and adapt to AI more efficiently and reduce the number of failures, increase the number of successes.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here. And last but not least, Matt Lewis, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having us. Very much appreciated. My name is Matt Lewis. I'm a career healthcare and life sciences executive. Started in AI about 18 years ago at Boehringer Ingelheim, and really see AI as a kind of innovation to help solve real problems people have with their lives and their health. Most recently, I was Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer at Inizio, transforming the enterprise in healthcare and life sciences, both internally and through the clinical kind of bench to bedside chain. I'm the author of the foreword to a book called AI Leadership Handbook to do this in the modern enterprise, and completely agree with Gregory that it's about kind of helping large enterprises adopt technology in a way that doesn't inflict trauma on the actual people while transformations are taking place. So started Elemental earlier this year to see transformations through with AI, and so that it is actually successful.
Awesome. Well, thank you one and all for being here. I'm looking forward to this discussion, but since I'm not qualified to really participate, I'll leave things to the six of you and step out of your way. I'll catch back up at the end of the show as we do some goodbyes and self-promotion. So with that, Eric, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to start by asking people about what are the most critical skills, how to get there, differentiating between predictive AI and generative AI, if you have something to say about that. And I'll just, to lead that, we'll go through the people in the same order, but let me just reflect for 1 second. Lewandowski, Gregory Lewandowski and Matt Lewis just were talking about the book that Matt forwarded and and agreeing with the needing to adopt to the culture and being about the people. I firmly believe that. If you're not a data scientist, I believe that the success of these projects, especially in predictive AI, more than anything depends on you once you've ramped up on a semi-technical skill set. As I mentioned, that's the purpose of my newer book, the AI Playbook. My company is also trying to bridge that gap. Gooder AI is the business user console for predictive AI. So I think a lot of the failure to deploy, and most of those projects actually fail to deploy, comes out of a divide. So let's fix that divide and talk about skill development, upskilling. So I'll talk to Ben first. Right. So how would you encapsulate that? The most critical skills needed to be acquired for running these kinds of AI projects successfully. And if there's a difference between how you'd answer that with regard to predictive AI versus generative.
Sure. Yeah. So I think AI is going to have a large impact on skills. I think AI is getting intelligent or more intelligent every 2 days. So 2 days ago, it wasn't as efficient as it is, today. And that's going to impact all the industries. I think it's one of the technological advancements that impacts analytics to wildlife conservation. The World Economic Forum actually has 2 areas that they suggest individuals develop skills in. Those 2 areas are human skills. Those are very unique to humans and something that AI can get good at, but not as good as humans. And that's empathy, communication. And then there's AI skills, other skills that AI is very good at, like analytical thinking. And by focusing on both of those, they're interdisciplinary. You can cross-train in those skills. You'll make yourself relevant to whatever the evolution of AI will bring us. And I think we're already starting to see some of that evolution. Some of the careers are already here, like AI trainers, experts, prompt engineers. And I think there's also going to be a focus, which was talked about on the Insight Jam a couple of days ago, of responsible AI, data governance, data ethics. By understanding those concepts early, no matter how advanced this AI thing gets, you're going to set yourself up for understanding what not to do with AI. And I think that's a very fundamental skill to have before you even touch a chatbot.
Awesome, Ben. Thanks. And how about you, Daniel? How would you address this?
Yeah, I often liken what's happening right now in the space in comparing to what like the transition that we went through from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0. So like Web 1.0, characterized by like if you wanted to make a change on a website, you had to send a ticket to a person called a webmaster. They were the only one who knew how to code. And, even if it was just something simple that you needed to change, they would have to do it because they had to alter the code. And then we saw the advance of like Web 2.0, right? Which came content management systems. These are the types of things where now more of this tech is accessible. You still need engineers in the background for customizations. And but even now, like my mom can create a website. So as technology becomes more and more accessible, kind of in this no-code way, we're going to see this pretty much natural progression of these skills. Ben mentioned the term prompt engineer. What's really interesting to me about this is that, like, when we talk about prompting as a skill, as one example, I think that it's probably just going to become as ubiquitous as Googling. Like, we wouldn't necessarily hire a professional Googler, and we're all just going to develop kind of this societal knowledge over time. And it will take time as we all get better at it. But as far as like core skills go, the main difference between like what we've been experiencing in the last decades with software and AI is that software either works or it doesn't. It's more binary. When we talk about generative AI or even predictive AI, it works in degrees, right? Like, it works somewhat well. All you have to do is watch old hilarious YouTube videos of individuals with Scottish accents trying to talk to their Alexa to know that, it doesn't always work. And I'm sorry, I think I just probably set everybody's off. But understanding like how well something needs to work for it to have a good user experience, and more importantly, knowing that all models are wrong, some models are useful. When the model gets it wrong, how do we manage the error handling? And that's going to depend on the consequences from when the model gets it wrong, right? Like the consequences of my Tesla Model 3 when it's in full self-driving, having an error are very high, right? So we have to have very tight error handling, for example, there. And then the consequences, right, of an Alexa not understanding speed lower. So we'll need to basically understand how things work in degrees, as well as from a design thinking standpoint, how are we going to handle it when these things ultimately do error out and give us incorrect information. And I think the very, very last thing I'll say in terms of skills is we're going to have to get really good at understanding and evaluating these new technologies. This is going to be like a big lift for procurement because the industry is obviously extremely fragmented. There's 1,000 AI solutions popping up every week, and the ability to evaluate these as they relate to, like, are they going to drive any noticeable change for our organization and users is very, very difficult.
Awesome. Donald, what would you add?
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I want to build on something that Daniel said, because what he said in particular that struck a chord with me was this idea that we will develop societal knowledge of how to do this. I met my wife 40 years ago, and she was the word processor operator for the research team that I worked for. And she was the person who knew all the WordPerfect codes and knew how to, format tables in this rather complex word processing environment. Who does that nowadays? There's a small number of specialists, maybe in legal documents and publishing, who do that. But most of us do word processing all the time. We just don't get trained in it because we don't need to be. So what are the skills that we actually would need to build for that kind of job role with, say, generative AI? I think they're exactly the skills that Ben was talking about, which is the skills of empathy and collaboration. The things that AI cannot do are the things we need to train humans in doing and need to train them to do better. In order to enhance the ability of AI and humans to work together, we actually have to train people in our human skills rather than in the AI skills. Now, there will be a set of people, and we can make the distinction between generative AI, where I think what I just said definitely applies, and predictive AI, which is a much more specialized application of AI, where people will need to be aware of all the things that we need to be aware of today with predictive analytics. They need to be understanding bias. They need to be able to understand how to deal with ambiguity, which we're very bad at dealing with. And so skills like that for predictive AI, for sure, we need to technically develop. But for generative AI, we will just become very natural consumers and users of that technology. And what we need to skill up in is the human skills which complement it rather than in the technology itself.
Awesome. Thank you, Donald. And Gregory.
Yes. So I like everybody's answers so far. So thank you. I think that to answer this question, I would probably put it into two categories. One is really going to be much more on the front end, thinking about maybe even on the business side of things. How do you design things properly? And this comes down to strategic thinking, good process design, identifying the right use cases, prioritizing them, valuing them, and evaluating them against each other in the same way. Communications, collaboration, and especially on the back end, cultural integration right into the company. So when it sticks, it becomes part of the culture, and when it's invisible, it becomes part of the culture. All of these are all skills that have nothing to do with the technology, but they are the human side of it. I think it was Dan that mentioned prompt engineering. I would actually, for the most part, put prompt engineering and creating high quality system instructions back into the business side of things. They are a discipline to learn that is not going to be overly technical all the time. And I think that, like Donald had said, we're all just going to be doing it before you know it. Very much like we talk to Siri or Amanda. I call her Amanda so she doesn't wake up. We just do it. On the other side of it, again, I think we're going to have to get into some of the agent-oriented thinking, right? We've got assistants, agents, and agentic workflows that are going to be coming at us over and over and over. And these are still quite a mystery to a lot of people. And this actually starts getting into some more of the technical thinking and how do you string all of these things together to really create something that can work in multiple steps and accomplish the processes and solve the problems that you're looking to solve. So those are the areas that I think, and again, I would put the beginning of it mostly into the business, the back end, a little bit higher on the technical side, but still achievable by all.
Awesome. Thanks, Gregory. And lastly, on this question to Matt.
No, it's hard going last like this. There were such brilliant answers.
You'll go first next time.
There's such wonderful answers by the rest of the panel. I think one of the challenges that exists right now in the kind of adoption of artificial intelligence by the modern enterprise is, kind of echoed by some commentary by other folks here, is that, there was a time not so long ago, I still remembered, I didn't have the gray in my beard perhaps, when you could build a model and productionize it. And, there was a very small number of people on your team, mostly with machine learning doctorates, that were close to this, and not many questions were asked of the business of kind of how the model was built or whether it had resiliency and drift and things like this. And there was support and resources, and the consideration of kind of how the work progressed forward kind of limited to that group alone, and kind of things like ETL and the rest were kind of limited to that group. But those days are long past. And now, this consideration of who uses and who adopts AI is really every single person that's an employee of the business. And with that being the case, data science is no longer the province of the chief data analytics officer, the CTO, the CIO. I was a CDAO for 7 years, and we touched a fair fraction of the business, but now everyone touches it. And as a result, it is really a kind of a citizen data science movement that's afoot. But the average person in the average business does not have data literacy, period. And we're trying to teach people how to kind of modernize their work with artificial intelligence, whether it's predictive or whether it's generative, whether it's agentic or something else, but they don't even have basic literacy in data science. And it is really challenging, extremely challenging, because they come to board meetings, they come to discussions about investment and use cases, but they don't even ask basic questions around sanctity of data or catalogs or understanding what metadata is or how it's surfaced. So there is a real core consideration of just how do you kind of up titrate the level of literacy for data itself, so that people, when they are approaching an interaction, a juxtaposition of a generative or predictive or agentic kind of workflow in their workflow, they can just think as a citizen data scientist, what does this mean for me in my actual context versus what I've done the last 10, 5, 2 years in role, and what questions do I need to ask, so that as a data analyst, as a interpreter of this material, as a responsible professional in role, that I can add value to the work. And I think that it really is really imperative for that consideration. I think also in the modern enterprise, especially in regulated enterprises within healthcare, within finance, within life sciences, the areas I work in most closely, there is a real challenge with regards to mindset. Many of these businesses are waiting for the government to kind of come in and say, hey, you can do this and you shouldn't do that. And as a result, they're just kind of like waiting on the sidelines, waiting for someone to come in and say, that these things are acceptable, and the rest, don't do those quite yet. Wait till 2028. But, actually, the vast majority of things that need to be solved are not actually subject to regulation. They're actually subject to the regulation of your own mind. Whether someone has like a fixed mindset and they're kind of stuck in 2013, or whether they have a growth mindset and they see what's possible to solve real problems for the customers and ultimately clinicians, patients, others in the ecosystem. And I think adopting a growth mindset coupled with a citizen data science disposition could get us significantly further than what we've been able to achieve in the last 2-3 years, when people say, oh, it's just, come in and sprinkle a little AI on top of this and see what happens, which does not end up working out very well.
I didn't realize that we were supposed to regulate our own mind. I think my mind might require some deregulation. So thank you, Matt. We're going to go through the opposite order. So I'll go back to Matt in a second. But first, I'd like to impose myself as a panelist and answer that question with a 20-second answer with regard to predictive AI in particular. And the reason is that generative is getting almost all the attention these days, which I think is a big problem, is a very costly mistake. I believe strongly that most organizations should be investing and investigating at least as much in predictive as generative, depending on the organization. Predictive AI is the technology you turn to improve your existing large-scale operations. So the answer to the question is the semi-technical understanding that I mentioned for business side learners. They must, in order to participate and collaborate deeply end-to-end across the project, they need to upscale, and it comes down to 3 things: what's predicted, how well, and what's done about it. So it's concrete, it's accessible. So those are my 2 cents with regard to the most important thing for predictive AI projects in particular. So now let's turn to the next topic, and I'm going to go through the panelists to give everybody another opportunity. Panelists know that I'm kind of combining the next 2 questions. If you were expecting, because all of us, including myself, are too long-winded. So we want to establish baseline literacy for whatever the particular use case or value proposition, whatever problems you're trying to solve with these types of technology. So to that end, what's the best pathway? Is it a formal education, a formal degree? Is it certain certifications? What are sort of the best modalities for you and your colleagues at the organization to be ramping up so that we can achieve this baseline data literacy, AI literacy? So go to Matt again.
Take myself off mute. So just coming back to your comment about the regulation of the mind, though, there is nothing more important than regulating one's own mind. If you don't have your mental health, you can't engage fully with AI to be augmented. It's not possible, period. That's why Elemental exists, to augment mental wellness. You just can't do it. AI literacy in the organization, I'll go back to what Albert Einstein said, there is no knowledge but that through experience. It's important, especially for people that don't have that citizen data science background, to understand what AI is, to sign up for a course or 6, to get a certificate or 3, to understand the basics so they understand what to engage with. But if you can't start building GPTs in OpenAI 4.0, or you can't actually start implementing apps, and you understand, what the agentic workflow looks like and how to solve it in your world, no amount of certificates will help you in the real world. You need to play with and experiment with generative often enough to be so frustrated that you feel like you're yelling at a real person, and be so thrilled that it's amazing that the technology works. If you don't feel that emotion on either side, both sides, then you haven't been doing it enough. And that's true at the board level, at the C-suite level, the executive leadership level, and the rank and file. Every single person in the organization needs to feel that. And until they do, they can't progress forward.
Great, Matt. I love that litmus test. If you're not frustrated, you haven't looked hard enough. Gregory.
Yeah. So first thing I would do actually is I would make a mandatory KPI for the company, starting at the top, regarding AI literacy. Formalize it, tie it to compensation, tie it to bonuses, tie it to promotions. that is how you will accomplish something here. And along with that, you also need to support it through the use of empowering AI champions or cross-functional mentoring across different departments. Formalized training, even down to the point of boot camps or foundational courses. These types of things are incredible at really getting people up to that basic level. Implementing a formal community and networking within the company. And again, I'll sneak back to the whole agentic workflow thing. People need to start thinking a little bit differently. So the training also needs to go in there. But for me, the KPIs are number one. And to tie back to what Matt was saying, hands-on, I think hackathons are fantastic for something like that, allowing individuals like myself, a non-technical user, to really get a chance to interact with some of the more technical people, and we both learn from each other.
That's great. I think imposing those types of internal credentials, that's a great idea to push this forward. Thanks, Gregory. Now on to Donald.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think there's really important to make a distinction between personal literacy and organizational literacy in this case. If we focus on personal literacy, we're in danger of creating a kind of medieval environment where there's a small number of highly literate people who become the elite users in this case because they master the art of literacy, as opposed to, say, in the modern world where everybody has a reasonable amount of literacy, which therefore enables our organizations and our communities to function better. So we need to really look not just in terms of baseline literacy, but in terms of making this distinction between, are we trying to improve the overall literacy of the organization slightly, but therefore dynamically and exponentially increasing the value to the organization, or are we focusing on individual literacy, which enables a small elite number of users? And if we're looking at that organizational literacy, that's going to be driven by awareness and usage and being very, very transparent about the use of AI in an organization. Because once people are aware of it, it's just like learning to read and write. You can go through your ABCs and learn your alphabet, but unless you have reading material, you're not going to become literate. In the same way, we need to expose people more and more, but in a conscious and transparent way, so they understand how AI is working in their organization, how it's being used. And it's that engagement with AI which is going to drive literacy much more than any formal training, which really only provides the entry point to literacy.
Great, Donald. I think a problem with elitism of the sort of power imbalance I think you're kind of implying is augmented also by that elitism leading to that disconnect, right? I think it leads to lack of function. Projects generally, at least in the predictive space, don't get deployed successfully, again, because of that disconnect tech biz. So I think that's one way to frame what we need to accomplish with better education.
Yeah, if I could just kind of jump on that one, I think one of the things we need to think about training is we often use training as the wrong kind of verb in industry. We talk about training our employees as if we're applying training to them, rather than training as something that they do for themselves. We train our staff rather than our staff train themselves. We need to turn that equation around.
Interesting. Yeah, the agency of that. Daniel.
I've seen firsthand like the benefits of like formal training in organization, having conducted these for some of the largest orgs on the planet, and like it's been fairly powerful and positive for those organizations, just in terms of general literacy around artificial intelligence, particularly discussions around things like ethics, legal, and compliance, as well as understanding, just basic infrastructure requirements. Interestingly enough, though, General Assembly put out a very large survey finding that something like 3 out of 5 VP directors and above have taken in orgs today have not taken any kind of formal AI training. So there's still like a fairly big gap there. I do have a very strong opinion on like who should go through these outside of like the data science and ML engineering community. Like we need to upskill procurement and compliance and legal right now. Like they need to happen super fast. And then I might be a little biased because I have a background in product management. Like I think like product managers are like mini CEOs of parts of the org, right? Like they need to get upskilled on this very, very quickly because they're the ones with kind of that 50,000 foot view into everything that's happening. And then on Donald's point, just around society, like I mentioned before, kind of the societal knowledge, like there was a talk a while back of like the internet as a basic human right. And I'm kind of wondering from Donald's kind of comments here, if we're going to start seeing conversations around like AI as a basic human right, and when that access becomes ubiquitous and individuals are able to experiment, that's when we're going to start truly building that societal knowledge that I talked about before.
Thank you, Daniel. That's terrific. Okay, and Ben, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. My dad always told me to plan the work and work the plan. And kind of what the other panelists have been saying is you need to create a learning plan, and that needs to happen at the organizational level, and that needs to happen at the individual level. At the organizational level, that might look more of a strategy, but essentially AI works as a system. If you can't think of AI as a system, then you don't really know where you need to train your employees, or your employees need to develop that learning plan. AI should be the heart of the system if you're correctly trying to implement it. If you're trying to do point solutions, those often aren't scalable, and it's going to lead to failure. And then that impacts learning because people don't want to learn from failure. They want to be successful. So that growth mindset at the organizational level will trickle down to the employees. The employees will be encouraged to produce their own learning plan. Learning plans don't have to be complex. They don't have to be technical. They can be short or long term. And essentially, you could use AI to do it if you wanted to, if you're comfortable with that. You can do a gap analysis of your skills. You can load up your resume. These are the skills I have. After you use your human skills, learning where you want to go, talking to other individuals, you can map out that plan, and then you can either reskill and go into a domain that maybe you didn't think of, or you can just upskill and get more efficient at what you're doing.
Awesome, Ben. Thanks so much. So for the next question, I think let's try this out free for all. So whoever's most assertive gets to talk first, basically, or who's fastest. So the question is about challenges to the upskilling. So fundamentally, what are the biggest hurdles? What are the biggest challenges that are getting in the way for individuals pursuing their career, and or for entire organizations figuring out where their different staff members need to upskill? And how do we address the challenges? So what's the antidote? I'll start with just sort of a quick comment from my perspective, which is that I think there's too much delegation. I think there's too much, hey, look, the techies, the data scientists are going to handle this. They own the whole project. But these need to be seen first as business projects and need to be deeply collaborative between tech and biz. And that's often what's missing. It means bridging a divide, getting on the same page, speaking the same language, and a common understanding in at least sort of a semi-technical arena. So that's my broad thoughts on the topic. Let's turn to the panel and see who'd like to add their 2 cents.
Fear. I would say, to me, that is the number one. Most of the people that I know, and I'm in a privileged environment of being with a lot of people who are in this arena, they are terrified of it. Every news story, every article only speaks about the bad. So people are afraid of it, and they need to really figure out how to get over that. And I wouldn't say it's just people, it's organizations as well. How many organizations don't have access to Claude or ChatGPT because one of the organizations or founders is terrified of what can happen? And rightly so in many cases, but there are ways around it. So I think that's probably the number one. Time constraints. This comes down to proper learning development design. It's been shown that smaller chunks can be very effective rather than some of these larger cohorts. I'm in a cohort that's taking me 25 hours a week right now, and it's very effective, but other smaller chunks could be just as effective. Cost, right? People are afraid of the cost, especially when you've got a fixed budget and variable costs associated with the use of tokens or the use of some of these tools. So that can affect budget decisions as well. So for me, those are kind of the top ones.
I'll second the risk aversion. Like, the risk aversion is real and intense. Like, I've literally done trainings for companies on generative AI, and they have outright banned generative AI at the organization, right? So, like, I'm training on something that is literally banned in their organization. What's crazy, though, is like the second you ban these technologies, you end up with shadow IT, right? Like, because people are going to use them anyway, naturally. And if you've banned it, now you have this like use of these technologies in an kind of an uncontrolled, unauditable situation. So I think it should behoove companies to start experimenting with these despite the risks, because it's going to happen anyway.
And the risks are actually quite low. I mean, again, this is one of those things where people will often state that there are risks, but their risks are, minuscule or completely absent. Especially early on when I was chief AI officer in role, we did have a ban on ChatGPT at my former employer Inizio. And it was like kind of like a knee-jerk thing. Like everyone had a ban, so we had one. And that was at a time before OpenAI had indicated that if you sent them a nice little note saying, "Hey, we'd like to opt out of having our training data sent back to you guys, we could keep it, on our side, and that would be fine." So we did what everyone did, but quickly we reversed ourselves. So within 2 months of release of ChatGPT, we were allowing and encouraging everyone to experiment and use it frequently. Now, anyone that's using any generative platform, there's almost no risk at all. But people still use this almost as a crutch to avoid experimenting or progressing forward into the future. I agree with the comments that everyone said thus far. I'd also say that there's a palpable sense of anxiety out there in the world. Beyond this kind of fear or terror of kind of what's going to happen to the business or people's roles, and just really based upon the comments that were made at the outset of our panel, just in terms of the pace of change, like that you could start, we did this, we had a partnership with Stanford and MIT and Google and some other shops to in-source content that had been existed previously and pull in modules for the workforce with 15,000 staff internally. But this isn't like 2009. Like, that content's not static. And you can talk about machine learning and kind of NLP in 2009. It's pretty much the same content in 2019. But you talk about LLMs in 2022, and you talk about it in 2024, and it's 100 times different. So if you don't move fast enough, the content's obsolete before the quarter's over. So you have people building these courses, and now all of a sudden they haven't deployed them yet, and all the content work is completely a waste. Just like those product teams are building generative AI platforms and they haven't yet deployed them, and now it's millions of dollars out the drain. So there is like a real concern that I have a colleague that I went to Cornell with a number of years ago that's an ethicist in the field, and he published an article in HBR called Generative AI Anxiety. And this generative AI anxiety is a real thing. Like, people are terrified that if not so much of job loss, so I think that's a concern as well, but that if they don't build, deploy, train fast enough, that the things they started building in September will be obsolete by January.
It's called the weight equation, right? Like in space travel, the idea is if I build a spaceship today and launch it, in 10 years, will I have better technology that if I launch that spaceship, it'll overtake the first one, right? Like, should I wait now and see where this is going before I implement something, just because it's going to become obsolete so fast? But it's almost a fallacy of an argument, right? Particularly with these technologies, given that technology and business itself is iterative, and we're going to have to continually update things.
Well, I think this question of risk does come up as a sort of, if this is what you ask people about, this is what they'll say, but it's very secondary to the strategic ambiguity. People, we're really worried about ambiguity. Human beings aren't comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. And because there's no strategic clarity about how people are going to use AI to achieve strategic goals, either in their own life or in their business, then that leaves room for this fear of risk. But the fear of the risk isn't primary. The risk is very secondary to this lack of strategic clarity. And companies who have actually established a very clear strategy about what they want to achieve with AI, they are then perfectly capable of evaluating the risk, and they discover, as Matt says, that the risk actually isn't all that great, and therefore they can continue with some confidence. Whenever I meet companies who are, in fear of the risk of AI, it turns out that that's because they haven't established a clear strategic definition of what they want to achieve. Therefore, they have no way of evaluating the risk, and that is much scarier.
There's Donald, you're making a great point I mean, but I also agree. Everybody's like fear. I think fear is real. I think there's a connection between that sort of fear of something doing something horrible, ethically wrong, automation overtaking and changing the job market extremely fast. I think that's hype. I don't think it changes that fast. I think that's just economic shifts, or of course the doomerism thing. It's going to destroy the world. I think that those go hand in hand. Those types of fear. And also just the intimidation factor of I don't get this stuff. How am I supposed to act like I understand it? It's so technically bewildering, and understanding the value proposition, therefore, is also bewildering. And I think that that's another myth. I think it's just bridging the gap. I think only a semi-technical understanding is necessary to understand the value proposition. So there's a way in which they go hand in hand. The doomerism stuff and some of the other ethical fears is sort of known as criti-hype. So it's sounding critical, but it's actually a way to say, hey, look, if this thing is powerful enough to destroy the world, it's probably pretty good at targeting my marketing as well. So it's a way to pump it up, but it certainly can backfire. And I think it's the same people who might be intimidated who are also going to turn out to be fearful. And so it's kind of breaking through both of those at the same time, kind of go hand in hand.
You know, it's so funny because Donald's answer was super insightful for me, Eric. Like, I almost think that this perception of risk is actually a function of what Donald said, our inability, or the organization's inability, to think strategically about these and to evaluate the technologies. And the risk aversion is a symptom of not having that framework of being able to think strategically about these,
Yeah.
right? Because
that's sort of what I was trying to say, but you said it better. Yeah, that's great.
There's also an AI overload, though, right? Or like a resource overload. If you go to Google and you try to look up an AI training or what AI is, there's technical AI, there's the predictive AI, there's all these different types of AIs. Individuals and even organizations might not know where to start. So kind of going back to the previous question, under defining what AI literacy is and developing that strategy and thinking of AI as a system will help reduce that overload, and it will help encourage people to figure out how to use AI for their work, not just try to figure out AI.
Well, I think one thing that really clouds the vision of understanding how do you discern between all these different educational options, and also the same question of like, I'm overwhelmed with fear because I'm not seeing clear value propositions. I think the main culprit is hype, and that hype is conveying grand expectations of autonomy that are beyond where we're actually headed. I think it all comes down to how autonomous is it going to be? To what degree do you unleash it, onboard it like a human employee, let it go? The mythology, the very prevalent national or international dialogue narrative is saying, hey, look, this thing's going to become human level in all ways. And I think that that's really central to what we're alluding to here.
Yeah. So Eric, you may have inadvertently brought it back to one of the things that I observe a lot is kind of the psychology of human beings behind it. And the fear there is one of many things that I like to connect together with the 5 stages of grief. But the fear can be as simple as, am I going to keep my job? Am I going to be able to, here's the psychology of it. Can I take care of my family? Can I buy my daughter that new pair of jeans that she wants? Am I still going to be as important? Will I have the same amount of influence? Will I still have a team? All of these have nothing to do with your job, but they're all offshoots of the fear or the lack of strategy that we're seeing everywhere.
Yeah, I agree with everything Greg just said. I also think that, you know, what you were saying earlier about the hype is really critical. But I will still state, and I've said this publicly, I presented on this, it's on LinkedIn, all over the place. I will state that AI at this point is significantly underhyped, not overhyped, by a tremendous amount. The value of artificial intelligence, especially generative AI in the space, has so much potential for us as a human race and society, and that it's not being well articulated within the enterprise. People that they grow up watching Terminator, they see AI in the media, and someone said the news articles are always negative. And then they come to work and someone says, hey, we're going to be using Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever. and they only hear these things about their job loss or their role change or their work skills or whatever, and they have these fears. But there are so many potential benefits across all parts of the organization that are not getting due justice, due visibility, if you will. And the next couple of years will hopefully transform many parts of the organization that in the 27 years I've been working in healthcare and life sciences, for the most part, have not changed very much at all and should change, because they don't add a lot of value to clinicians, researchers, patients, the world at large, and will hopefully change in the next 2 to 3 years. I don't think it's overhyped at all. It's significantly underhyped.
Oh, well, I have to push back, sort of. I would just qualify that. I think it's very overhyped in certain ways. Overhyped one way, therefore underhyped in another. I think one leads to the other. This sort of narrative of how autonomous, and whether we're approaching artificial general intelligence, which is basically an artificial human, and that bewilders, overwhelms, and distracts from the true value, and in that way underhypes.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I mean, it's also the space is moving so fast that even the conversations that we have here today that Greg was introducing first about agentic AI, if you were to poll the average worker in any modern enterprise and to ask them to describe or define what agentic even means, I guarantee you the vast majority would not be able to do so, let alone, to talk about how LLMs work, how they were trained first, what they did, what's miraculous and remarkable, and then go back to predictive or ML, NLP, DL, anything like that. So the space is just evolving so quickly that it's to recognize what is being promised or hyped versus what is underhyped. It's the gap between expert and rank and file is just widening so fast.
Right, and that contradiction between it's so good, it's not, it's nothing. I think that's. I have that, right? So I was in natural language processing research group for 9 years at Columbia during graduate school, or during 6 years. I never thought I'd see something like this in my lifetime. And yet I push against the hype. I'm not a social media maven, but I do have one video on Big Think that's received 700,000 views. And it's me saying, hey, come on, calm down. It's too much hype. And yet I think it's the most amazing thing I never thought I'd see in my lifetime.
I love this because this gets at the heart of we have a nomenclature problem. When we talk about this, right? Everything is freaking AI. And when we talk about AI, it's just so broad in the way that we're communicating it that it's easy to it's become a brand at this point, right? Almost, and it carries a connotation with it. I have a hot take prediction. My hot take prediction is that in several years, we're not going to be talking about AI because the next big movement is the application layer. And really, AI is just a feature and a new user interface, right? Just like voice was a new user interface. And we're going to have an application layer that enables more no-code and low-code capabilities, that has artificial intelligence under the hood. But we're going to stop using the term AI because we're just going to be naturally using these applications. And then we'll actually start realizing some of that hype when it's starting to get into the things that we're using every day, rather than talking about it as this big, giant, nebulous thing in and of itself.
Yes, Daniel, I love that. Once it becomes nearly invisible is when it really starts to take off.
Yes.
Yeah, AI is whatever hasn't been done yet. That's the definition. It kills itself. Like the definition of God in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So, I mean, you can chime in more on this topic. Let's sort of turn it to the sort of last major sort of conversation starter here, or conversation ender, right? So what's the future hold? What are the emerging trends that are vital to sort of get out ahead of it in terms of the upskilling?
I mean, I'll just jump in real quickly. I mean, I think everything everyone said here is critical. AI literacy, data literacy, helping people recognize that, the skills they had when they were humans before AI existed in their world are still relevant, and are actually more relevant now than they were before. The human skills don't go away just because AI is now a colleague or a collaborator. those things are still relevant. I think in the future, though, you'll start seeing, and this is work that we're doing, really focused around helping people manifest and show up authentically in the workplace so that they can actually be well enough not to be running for the door when people tell them robots are going to take their job, and that they are well enough to actually accommodate the change of major enterprise transformation. And you'll start seeing things like the durable skills that people used to be calling soft skills, if you will, being a major focus of large enterprise, and also things like resiliency and flexibility and agility not being just product teams and software development and data science, but the rank and file being able to accommodate everlasting change, because having a transformation every 18 months will be the thing of the past. It'll be a nonstop dynamic transformation, and having a change muscle and being able to flex it on and off will be essential for every professional.
Kind of to what Daniel was saying before too, this is my spin on it, but there's more individuals that use a cell phone than make the cell phone, and making the cell phone is probably the more technical aspect of it, and then everyone else consumes it essentially. Same thing with AI. So in traditional higher education, some of the trends are it's becoming too expensive, it takes too long to do, sometimes it's behind industry. So even if you do it, you might not be up to standard, so to speak. AI is going to be able to enhance all of those things. I think most traditional universities can start to focus on mastery and application versus memorization. Students are going to be able to learn more quickly, so you can cover more in your curriculum. AI is going to unlock personalized learning. That might make individuals more likely to stay, or make whatever they're learning more custom to them. And they're always going to have 24/7 support. I mean, if you're stuck on a problem set, you don't have to wait for office hours anymore. You can work with AI to try to figure it out, which means higher education is going to need to change how they offer their products. Maybe it's, a problem set, the prompts I use, the outputs, me checking to make sure that that's correct, which is very different than it is today.
Dude, super well said, Ben. You actually just triggered a thought for me too. Like one way that I think about this is the spectrum of consume versus create, right? And it truly is a spectrum. On the consume side, particularly for business, for me, this is really about translating tried and true, known strategic frameworks that we've been using for a long time into the world of AI. I've got one quick example. As a product manager, like I've adopted a thought process first created by the R&D firm IDEO around thinking and categorizing like products into desirability, feasibility, and viability. And I've been working to translate that framework that IDEO created into thinking about it for like functional AI, like desirability is our user needs. To what degree does this need to work, right? Viability is our business goals and risks associated with it. Are we worried about privacy or hallucinations, right? And then feasibility, do we have the talent, the skill, is the tech there in order to enable this? And that's one example of a framework that's been around for a long time that we need to translate and work with to get it to work with this new world of data science and AI.
I think the thing that we'll notice most with the development of AI over the next few years is the emergence of genuine conversational interfaces. And by that, I mean interfaces which handle ambiguity and handle entrainment much better. When today, the idea of prompt engineering is in many ways extremely artificial. That's not the way human beings communicate. Our communication is entirely a process of disambiguation. And we have all our gestures and we have our disfluencies, and our conversation is always about trying to clarify what the other person is saying and what our response to that is. And today, the idea that we have to craft a prompt in order to get a perfect answer, that's like writing a SQL query. That's not the way it works. And if you remember back in the old Google, in the days of things like, AldoNet, Lycos, AltaVista, you used to search the web by basically creating queries. And then Google came along and said, no, just ask for anything. And we'll provide you with an experience that enables you to disambiguate that and browse it. And that's what's going to happen in AI. The idea that we have to craft a prompt in order to get the best response is inhuman. It's literally inhuman. What we need to do is have a process that actually handles ambiguity a lot better. And that's genuine conversation.
Donald, I love it. I love the conversational and the communications aspect of it, because I think you're right. The prompting is very artificial. So as we look forward, though, one of the things that I always think about is actually looking backward and learning from history. And Lotus 123 was one of the first spreadsheets, and it truly changed the world. It made data accessible and available to the layperson. It made people and organizations and companies obsolete almost overnight. It sold hand over fist. And I think we're going to see the same type of thing here. So there's going to be a few very, very useful products that come out, tools, services, whatever it happens to be, that really changes the face of this. And I think we're going to see a future that follows the same patterns as Lotus 123, the internet, radio, television, the car, the industrial revolution, whatever it happens to be. We're going to see a very similar pattern here.
Great. Anybody have any more to say about predictive? Predictive is less seemingly human-like, but more potentially autonomous. Thoughts?
Well, I think the most important thing about predictive is that actually predictive is, I think we're going to see this distinction being made between AI and machine learning and predictive analytics. Just now, they're sort of confused together, but AI is absolutely going to become, it already is in most people's conversation, really means generative AI. Mm-hmm. And the ability of AI to work with language.
I would love that if the word became less ambiguous and actually just meant generative in particular. It's just that the definition has changed so many times. I don't put too much hope in that yet.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
I use the term data science when I talk about more like just a predictive model, right? Or like algorithms when I'm trying to make a distinction in the way that I talk. But Eric, I think you called it out in the beginning, and Andrew Ng in his TED Talk last year or the year before called this out, basically saying that today predictive AI or predictive data science, algorithms, models, whatever you want to call it, is providing more business value and will continue in the near term to continue to provide more business value than generative AI. It's just more invisible, right? Like it is actually more invisible. This is the things that are predicting like lifetime value or forecasting sales trends or like the pricing models for hotels and airlines. This is stuff that's been around for a long time that's going to continue to provide a lot of value.
And you know why? Because it goes back to the point I made earlier that there's strategic clarity about what that's for. And there's no strategic clarity about what generative AI is for. But you can't implement predictive AI without really having strategic clarity of what you want to achieve.
Generative AI is also simpler for individuals to understand too, right? Like when I say the word data science, this call and some other groups know what that means. When I say generative AI, they think it's a Dolly image or me like randomly putting together something into an LLM. So, I mean, maybe it's the words too.
I thought it was a poem. So any last quick words? We're pretty much close to out of time. This has been much better than I even hoped. I think that you all provided amazing insights. This was a great conversation.
I definitely have to echo that sentiment, Eric. Thank you for leading the discussion. It's been great listening in over the past 57 minutes here. Before we go, I'd love to offer each of you an opportunity to promote your company, your solution, your podcast, a book, whatever you'd like to plug. The floor is yours. We'll go counterclockwise and start with Matt. And as we are short on time, let's keep these real short if we could.
Sure. Again, thanks so much, everyone. Happy New Year in advance. Our organization, Elemental.ai, is augmenting the future of mental wellness. It's a juxtaposition of generative AI and mental health and exploring really the thorny problems that have been unsolved in the space for as long as I've been alive, trying to provide outsized impact and value to enterprise customers and people with depression, mental illness, and mental health challenges across the ecosystem. And all our best for the new year. Thanks so much.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate your time. Let's go over to Gregory next.
Yes. Hi, Gregory Lewandowski. And I recently started an AI consulting firm called Glue. So partly my name, partly the fact that I've been known throughout my career to bring people in Yeah, partly because I've also been known throughout my career to bring people and organizations together. So my tagline for the company is AI is 10% technology and 90% people. And again, going back in history, I believe that this is true. Going back to my own experiences with business intelligence and analytics, I believe that this is true. And we see a lot of failures as a result of really not choosing the right use cases, not doing things in the right way. So I'm here to help my clients become more successful with what they have and to humanize AI.
Excellent. Thank you for being here, Greg. Appreciate your time. Donald, where would you like to send the audience?
Yeah, just search for me, Donald Farmer. You'll find me online. Do make sure you follow the data guy and not the cult horror movie director who made Shark Exorcist and Chainsaw Cheerleaders. Although, to be honest, you might find that more interesting than me talking about data endlessly. But search for me and you'll find me.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Donald. Let's go over to Daniel next.
Yeah, I mean, if you've enjoyed hearing me yap about AI today, you can reach out to General Assembly and have me yap for your company if you would like about this. But if you also want just basic help with AI infrastructure and getting your organization into a stage of technical maturity for artificial intelligence, that's what my core company does, Gravity AI. So find me on LinkedIn. And even if you just want to yap without a company, find me on LinkedIn, because obviously I love talking about this.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Ben, how about you?
I'm Ben Tasker. You can check me out on LinkedIn. I'm always providing LLM walkthroughs, foundational AI literacy guides. I'm very collaborative in that sense. Southern New Hampshire University also just launched a 6-week micro-credential around generative AI. It links to what we call a certified micro-credential. So users or students will go through a 6-week training course, and you'll get a verified micro-credential from a major online university at the end of it, and you can focus on that foundational AI literacy knowledge.
Thank you very much for being here. Last but not least, our moderator, Eric.
Yeah, the panel sort of ended by making the point that predictive AI projects or predictive analytics tend to have a clearer, more well-defined use case often, and why the value can be clear in that way. But I'd say that that's only true among those familiar. It's not too much to be familiar. This is the technology you turn to improve your existing large-scale operations. So if you want to ramp up on it, the AI Playbook is my newer book, and bizml.com is the website. That's the titular playbook that's presented by the book, the business practice for running machine learning projects, bizml. And then if you're conducting a predictive AI project and you'd like to bridge that gap, bring visibility to the business stakeholders so that the project has a much greater success of actually deploying and not only generating, but capturing value. That's the mission of our startup, Gooder AI. We're the business user console for predictive AI projects.
Excellent. Thank you one and all for being here. Really appreciate your time and expertise. That will do it for Insight Jam Live 2024. It has been a whirlwind week of coverage. We did 29 separate events, over 20 hours of expert coverage featuring experts. I want to say 82 of them over the course of the last week. It has been a blast. If you would like to catch up on anything you missed, please join the conversation that's always happening at insightjam.com. I would also, of course, love to thank the entire team here at Solutions Review for a tireless few weeks of work getting everything prepped and organized and distributed and published and promoted across our channels. Speaking of which, please subscribe to the Insight Jam YouTube channel. We are now over 558,000 subscribers and growing strong. We'd love for you to join those ranks. For this group, and for now, however, that will do it for us. Thank you very much for watching and listening. We hope you have a great and safe, happy holiday season. And until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you.
For video highlights, replays, and more, visit insightjam.com.